translator. Oh, we're starting now. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Rosalind Famous. You might recognize my last name. I am the sister of Thomas Christopher Famous, and I am here working in his replacement today as he was not able to be on camera. So I am here with our guest today, and I'm happy to get to him as quickly as possible. We are going to bring online, we have Mr. Torrington, Mr. Arthur Torrington. And he is, I'm going to give you a brief introduction, but he will tell you his story himself in his own words. But Mr. Torrington is the co-founder of the Windrush Foundation in the UK, which was started in 1996 along with Mr. Sam King. I am not going to go into much detail because I'm sure he has far more exciting details to tell you, but I am so happy to welcome him today. I know that it is Black History Month in the UK, so this is going to be a great topic, not only for people in the UK, but also for people in the Caribbean, and for myself to learn a little bit more about the Windrush generation and its legacy. So, Mr. Torrington, how are you today?
I'm very good indeed. Very good.
Welcome to Territories Talk. I'm going to quickly jump in because I know you have a lot to say. So I'm going to ask you to tell me a little bit about yourself. I know that you grew up in Guyana, and I'd love to hear a little bit about your days in Guyana and your community that you grew up with in Georgetown, Guyana.
Yes, I was born in Guyana and grew up there, spent a lot of my teenage years there. And it was an opportunity that I took to come to England to do studies as a teenager. And that's what happened. It was a challenge to be in a foreign country, not having traveled abroad before. And you're coming to a large city, a city of millions of people. And that's what happened there in the early 1960s when I came to England, to London, as a boy, as a teenager. So growing up in Guyana, obviously it's a different life from living in London. So I had a good experience, I should say, reasonably in Guyana, in Georgetown. Georgetown is the place that I come from, and it was a good life there. But coming to England, then I took up the challenge as a teenager.
Mm-hmm. And from your first time there, what if you have a memory that stands out as maybe like a culture clash when you first arrived in London?
Yes, indeed, culture clash. And as they say, you come to a country and indeed you get, you see different things and you have to get accustomed to living in a different culture and learning. So I was one who was able to listen and learn, not to get too quick, about things, but to look around. And each day I learned things, I adapted as much as possible. And yes, there certainly was a culture clash, but I was, willing to actually accept that because I knew I had to be in a different culture, a culture that I had to learn. I had to, to do a lot of, I should say, maneuvering in that culture, learning and developing and contributing to that culture. And that's what I've been doing from the 1960s.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Just giving us a little bit of personal information and what brought you to London. Um, so I would also like to ask you a little bit about um, what led you to open the Wind or establish the Windrush Foundation.
Okay, now this particular subject of Windrush, it's a big topic here in England. Well, I should say not only England, but it's also throughout the UK. And my involvement about the subject Windrush is an involvement that brought me in contact with a gentleman by the name of Samuel King. Now, this particular person was a volunteer in the Royal Air Force way back in 1944. So when we're talking about 1944, we're talking about the war, the Second World War. Britain was fighting with allies against Germany, and the Germans were people who, who at one point it seems as though they were winning the war. Until the Americans actually came in, and there was a cry. There was there's an outcry to the West Indies, including Bermuda and all the other islands, for people to come along, especially young men. And that's what happened with Sam King. He was a gentleman, a young gentleman, a young man of, he was 17, getting into 18, and he volunteered to join the RAF, the Royal Air Force. And yes, he came to England to serve, and he served well. But after a while, obviously you had the ending of the war. That's Sam King. Yes, Sam King, a very proud man. He served in the war for at least, let's put it this way. After the war, 1945, he stayed on for a couple of years. And eventually he was demobbed, sort of demobilized, and he returned to Jamaica, to a place called Portland in Jamaica. Now, he felt that he couldn't live. He couldn't really spend the rest of his life in Jamaica. He felt that he'd be more comfortable in England, and that's what happened. He took the first opportunity when a ship came along, the Empire Windrush. That ship arrived in Kingston, Jamaica in 1948, and in May. And this gentleman, Sam King, he took that ship. And this ship was on his mind for the rest of his life, because he felt that he was going to a place that he knew about. He knew England and Scotland and Wales reasonably well, and he felt that this is a journey, and he journeyed on the Empire Windrush and landed at a place called Tilbury Docks in England. Officially he landed on the 22nd of June 1948. Now that was a very big occasion in England. You had lots of newspapers, reporters, you had television, and those things, they were there, and they were reporting on this ship that came bringing hundreds of West Indians. And I must say that this ship brought a good number of people from Bermuda. In fact, it was the second largest group of people who actually came from Bermuda. I think it was something like more than 100 people, 100, possibly 150. I can't recall that exactly now. They were the largest number of people, apart from the Jamaicans, that came. And it was quite a day. Now, that day was on Sam King's mind for a very long time. So in 1995, he actually asked me to work with him. Obviously, at that time, I was an older person, and he felt that I could actually help him to realize his aim. His aim was to feature the Windrush ship as an iconic ship. And that's what we did. And, we will be able to look at his journey and look at the journey of Windrush in a particular way. There he is. This is Sam King here, and three of his friends. Sam King is the man there with the gray hair, and a very proud gentleman. He always stood stately. As an RAF veteran, he knew exactly how to position himself as an important member of British society. Now, what's important about 1995, 96 especially, we became a charity in 1996, and the idea was to promote the Empire Windrush as a ship bringing not the first settlers, totally from the West Indies, because West Indies were providing people and settlers for centuries, really. When you think about it, from the 1600s, you had people coming to England from the West Indies in different ways. Some of them were enslaved, some of them were free, eventually, and that is how people came to England and from the West Indies. So it was not something in 1948 of people coming on this Empire Windrush for the very first time. There were lots of black people, Asian people, Indo-Caribbean people coming all the time before the war, before the Empire Windrush. So our particular project was to do with talking about people who came after the war, right? And these people who came after the war were coming because Britain really at that time, were Britain and the various parts of Britain, for example, like Wales and Scotland, they needed people to rebuild the country. So when these particular people came from the West Indies, they came knowing that Britain would have jobs. Mm-hmm. They weren't invited formally. That's the point about those who came in 1948, in June 1948. They knew there were jobs because they were told that there were jobs by those who went back to the Caribbean, who were demobbed from the RAF. So those who came on the ship were coming. Some of them were coming as new people, never traveled before. Mm-hmm. The case there was that they were going to be, I suppose, employed in various capacities. Some of them were skilled. For example, Sam King was a flight engineer, so he knew how to repair airplanes and so on. But what happened with Sam King? He went back into the RAF after he arrived in 1948. So when we began the Windrush Foundation, we had all that background to supply to people. And it was very hard going because we were on our own, just the two of us in 1996, you see. So it was all about this Empire Windrush. Now,
okay.
Yeah.
So I have a question about, first of all, when people know that they're coming to England or to the UK with opportunities, the knowing that there are opportunities in the UK, what is the mindset? What was the mindset of the people who came on Empire Windrush when they was the day that they landed?
Well, they were hoping for jobs that they could do fairly well, but many of them didn't get the jobs that they actually really hoped for, because that was a time when there were opportunities, but only opportunities for jobs that the local people, some of them didn't actually want to do anymore. Mm-hmm. For example, some of the early settlers came and had to wash dishes, had to be employed in hotels and things like that. Some of them actually eventually went into, well, doing work on the London Transport, the British Railways. So some of the people who came on the ship, and you may have seen some of the pictures, they went into those employments. But their expectations, they had high expectations, but eventually they didn't get the jobs that they were really perhaps trained for or wanted.
And you said that there were a lot of newspapers and cameras that were there on the day that the ship landed. What was the media, or the conversation in the media about the people who were landing through Empire Windrush?
Well, look, the media was, they were actually, the reporters were really listening to the members of Parliament at the time. So Parliament was actually providing information about those who are coming over. And if you notice that this particular cutting from a newspaper, it was a focus on Jamaicans, although there were lots of other people, different nationalities on the ship. It seems to me that the newspapers only had Jamaicans in mind, and that is something that we had to dispel. That were other people coming from the West Indies. So yes, they weren't coming to jobs directly. Apart from some servicemen who were coming back to jobs that they already had signed up for. The majority of the people who were coming, they weren't, they didn't have jobs to come to. So really, the newspapers were really, I should say, excited about the men and women when they arrived. And the 22nd of June was quite an occasion. And on that particular day, something like 236 people on the ship, passengers who came on the ship, did not have anywhere to go, and eventually they had to be accommodated in a place called the Clapham South Deep Shelter, and that's an exciting part of their journey, because they didn't have any as much money to go to hotels, but they had to actually stay in former air raid shelters, and that was Clapham South Deep Shelter.
Okay, and there was no mention in the newspaper, for example. I'm trying to imagine that these were people who did serve in the Royal Air Force and in the war to help the UK win the World War II. So I'm just trying to imagine if in the newspaper that was mentioned at the time, or if it was just mentioned that.
Yes, that's right. That's right, because Pathé News, that was the company that they were doing the television bit, and they mentioned some of them had served in the Royal Air Force, had served Britain. Now they were coming back as war veterans, but you see, they weren't treated as war veterans. That's the thing. They were treated as immigrants, and that was the wrong thing. Had they been given that accolade, as war veterans. Now there was an image that appeared a few seconds ago, and that showed two men, this one in particular, who were in the Clapham South Deep Shelter, and you would notice there that they where they're sitting, these are double, not double bunk beds. These were triple bunk beds, 3 beds in that particular position, that the men, many men that went there, had to actually stay there for at least 2 or 3 weeks. And here are these 2 men writing home, and telling their relatives that they've arrived safely, and but they're staying in the deep shelter. Now the deep shelter, it was a was a place that was used by those who were sheltering from bombs. when the Germans were coming over to London and dropping bombs, people in the hundreds and the hundreds would actually go into these tunnels. They sent these places way down, something like 180 steps, down at the bottom of the earth, really. And by the way, those the trains, the underground trains that were actually running, the underground trains would be a level above where these men are staying. So if you imagine you're on that particular a top, let's say you're on the first floor, your ground floor would be the trains running. So no, sorry, the first floor will be the trains are running, and the ground floor will be where these men were staying in the deep shelter. So that's how it was. So they were welcome, yes, by the newspaper men and friends and relatives, but when they went to when the accommodation was not that pleasant, but that was how life was for the early those who settled in 1948.
1948. Okay. Wonderful. And I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Now you said you came into to the UK in the 60s, correct? In the 60s.
Yeah, that's right.
And how did you travel to the UK at that time?
Well, I traveled by ship, not on the Windrush. The Windrush only made one journey. The Windrush made one journey to the West Indies and back to England. So I came on another ship, and it wasn't a similar journey to the Windrush from what I hear, but it was typical of those people who were traveling from the West Indies in the 1950s and early 1960s, or mid 1960s, I should say. So my experience was not the same as the people who came on the Empire Windrush.
Okay. And by that time, so about maybe 12, 15 years had passed since Windrush first settled or first came to the UK. What was say your first time experience compared to a person who came in the first settled, or the first group of people that came in 1948 by that time?
Well, as young people, we were, shall I say, unaccustomed to the way of life, the weather, especially the weather, and that we had to be acclimatized, so to speak. Different people, you're meeting different people in terms of those who you may be working with. You got to get accustomed to the work situation. You got to get accustomed to how one has to travel, to work on the underground or by buses. And it's a completely different life from the life in the West Indies. And those were the early days in the 1960s. And Britain obviously is a modern country now, but in those particular days, Britain had been bombed quite a bit, especially London, a lot of bombing, and there were lots of craters, in the country. And here we see some of the bombing and some of the results, I suppose, of the bombing and the devastation in London and elsewhere in the cities, Birmingham, Coventry, and other places. Britain was quite not a bomb site, but at least the bombs had damaged Britain. Britain needed to be rebuilt.
Wow.
That's what people who came from the West Indies, that's what they eventually helped to do, rebuild Britain.
And was there a sense of community, for example, with those who came on the first boat, Windrush, and sort of taking people in under their wing, or was it basically every man to himself?
Well, because Britain is a big place, people went to various parts of the country, various parts of London. So you were separated really by miles. whether you're settling in Birmingham, 150 miles away, whether you're settling in Nottingham, Manchester. So in that sense, communities had to, should I say, take time to develop. Because
Okay.
people were new. They had to learn how to live with new people, develop new friends.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
Now, I know that we are talking about Windrush Foundation, but I would also like to point out to our audience that in the same year that you founded the Windrush Foundation, you also founded the Aquiano Society.
Equiano Society.
Aquiano Society.
That's right.
And I just wanted to, I know it's a bit of a sidetrack, but I think it's also important, especially during Black History Month, to talk a little bit about that.
Well, although Equiano was an African as a young, well, he was a kid, really. He was, maybe 10, 11, 12. We're not too sure, but he was kidnapped and taken from Africa. And he eventually ended up in the West Indies. And the first stop that he had was in Barbados. So, and what's interesting about Barbados and Equiano is what we know now, because I was there in Barbados three or so years ago, and there's a memorial for Equiano there in Bridgetown, and that's so important. And then from Bridgetown, Equiano he wasn't sold to anybody, so he had to. They took him to. That's him, yeah. They took him to Virginia. He wasn't. He was there as a young kid again, and he was a servant. And eventually, he was sold to another person, a captain, a ship. Well, it wasn't so much a ship captain yet, but he was sold to a Royal Navy personnel and taken on a ship. So Equiano spent a lot of his time on ships, and he was in different wars. As what I call in those days a powder monkey, which is to do with taking cannonballs to people, to soldiers who are actually, who are firing cannons. So Equiano was important in the life of Britain. He was an abolitionist in a very similar way to William Wilberforce. And our society, Equiano Society, we helped to raise the consciousness of this man's contribution, especially to actually people of African, Caribbean backgrounds and Africans in general, to British society, because he was an abolitionist. He wrote a book, and this book is about his life in back home in Igbo land. He was an Igbo. His life in the Caribbean, his life in England, and so on. It's a very important person, a very a crucial person in the life of Africans in England, because he was an abolitionist, a writer, a very, I would say, intelligent man. And our society has helped to bring him to the attention of Britain. So he's a very well celebrated person. He has a plaque in Westminster Abbey, St. Margaret's Church. We have done a lot of things for Equiano, for him to be known by people. And now Equiano is an important person, and it's due to what we've been doing to make sure that people of all backgrounds in this country, Black or white, Asian, and so on, to know about him. And something else? There is a cable that runs from Portugal to South Africa named the Equiano cable. Isn't that something?
Oh, look at that.
This cable is one of these beneath the sea cables.
It's a little bit ironic.
No, the Equiano cable, because nobody has traveled as much as Equiano, as far as we know. Very few Africans, has traveled like Equiano. He traveled to, all over the place. I'm not sure whether he actually visited Bermuda, but I know that he actually visited most of the Caribbean islands. Oh, you got it. There we are. Equiano cable. That's the route. That's most honorable to Equiano. Very, very important. We had a letter from one of the people who helped to lay the cable. Really, yeah, very good. Good.
I think it's I find it's interesting to have that connection between Portugal and Africa, giving
Absolutely. And
given
what's interesting
Portugal's
is that Equiano also visited Portugal and quite a
hmm
number of places, that you and I might not be able to visit in our lifetime. But it's quite
yeah.
something. This person.
Okay. Thank you very much for that side note. But I'll get back to our conversation regarding the Windrush Foundation. I know that uh, there is an upcoming event that you are planning um, for the Windrush Foundation. I believe it's about the legacy and activating the legacy of the Windrush generation.
Well, legacy in terms of the people who came and served. They came and helped to make the community a much sounder place, to lay the foundation. And this is an event coming up next Sunday. This is an online event. It's a free event. And this event helps people to, I suppose, appreciate those who came before and who's left a legacy of leadership, a legacy whereby those of us who are, picking up the baton, so to speak, we can carry on the work. And that legacy is a rich legacy, a legacy of tenacity, a legacy of wanting to be, to be people who have a particular aim in life to move things on. And this particular ship has an image of a lady who came as 21 years of age from Trinidad, and behind her you have troops that were coming back to serve again, RAF, I should say, RAF contacts. So in that sense, these are the people who led the way.
Mm-hmm.
This particular lady here, she was a singer. She became an outstanding European singer, international, and we're very proud of her. Her name is Mona Baptiste, and we are very proud of her. So people like her has a legacy. Has a legacy in terms of her boldness as a young a woman of 21. She was 20 when she left home, 21 when she arrived, and that she was bold enough to make a substantial impact on society.
And speaking of impact on society, I imagine, and forgive my ignorance, is I imagine there are many people who have come from the Windrush generation who have had an outstanding impact on UK culture. Are there a couple that you can name, just to give our audience some idea of those?
Yes, indeed. I have to mention, and it's important to mention, Sam King. Now, Sam King is, I would say, like, the original person, or the person who brought about this whole thing about Windrush. If there wasn't, Sam King, we wouldn't know of Windrush in the way we know it now. In other words, he was the founder of Windrush Day. Now here he is, and a young man, RAF, he's an older man. And this is a picture of him at an exhibition, the one on your left, where in 2008, there was an exhibition called From War to Windrush. And that particular exhibition featured Sam and some other people who played an important part. Because let's face it, if there was no war, there wouldn't be Windrush.
Mm-hmm.
Windrush was a ship. And before that ship was called Windrush, it was Monte Rosa, a German ship that the Germans used in the war. They're part of the war, where the Monte Rosa was a troop ship for them. But when the war was lost, I think for the Germans, Britain took as a prize of war took the ship and renamed it Empire Windrush, right? And that
Okay.
ship has now become iconic because of Sam King. He's the guy that ensured that the Sam King, that the ship remains a memory for people who came in 1948 because he was on the ship. And that is so important. He had, advertisements in 1967, asking for people who were on the ship so that they could commemorate in 1968 the 20th anniversary of Windrush Day, and that's what Sam did. So Sam is iconic in his own right, and for him, we actually owe a lot of a lot of respect for his.
Mr. Turrington, my battery is running low. I'll be right back. But please continue to speak to the audience as I fix this issue in the background.
Indeed. So
okay.
Yeah, with Sam King, because he has actually worked so. He's worked so. Shall I say, without any kind of wanting to stop working on it, he has ensured that the legacy goes on. Now, the legacy is two things: is to remember the war, right, from war to Windrush. If there was no war, there wouldn't be Windrush. And what you're seeing here with this particular image on the screen is that the national the Imperial War Museum, they featured this particular exhibition in 2008, and it was a very successful exhibition that came out that was held from the summer of 2008 right on to 2009. In fact, it was not meant to be that long, maybe for a year, but the demand for children, for school children, was really pushing the museum to have him, or to have the actual exhibition featured in this way. So I would say that Sam King stands out, as the person, as the actual role model. A closer up of the exhibition, and this is the one part of the exhibition. There was another part of the exhibition which I don't think there's much sort of like photographs that I've seen, but this is one part. This is the major part of the exhibition that had dozens of images of men and women who served. Some of them came back on the Empire Windrush, and some of them remained in the UK, and they helped to rebuild Britain.
Wonderful. And when I have two questions. Is this exhibition, for example, is it a permanent exhibition, or is there a museum for the Windrush?
Well, what's happening now? There is an organization that has that name to do with a national museum, but it's only just started. So we have to wait to see what the museum will bring out. But there are different things to do with Windrush. For example, Windrush Foundation, we have a touring exhibition called From War to Windrush. That exhibition tours various venues, and that particular exhibition tells the story from what happened in the war, and it goes right through to the Windrush story, covering arrival on the ship, and covering Sam King's becoming a mayor of Southwark, one of the boroughs here in London. And yes, in fact, Sam King was the first black mayor of the borough of Southwark, and that was so important. Those sort of things were unusual in 1984, and Sam King was the mayor. He served for 1 year, and he continued to serve in different capacities as a former mayor until he passed away, I should say, in 2016. So that's the so there's no permanent museum yet, but this is what's envisaged.
And is there, or has there been any, as this is a traveling tour, has it ever been taken beyond the UK? Has it been taken to the Caribbean, to the different islands?
Well, not when see Windrush. I think there's an exhibition in Barbados. When I went to Barbados, there's a Windrush
Okay.
exhibition there. I'm not sure whether it's still there, but at least it's a part of of their central library. A very impressive exhibition. But it's just that some islands have taken taken hold of it, especially I should say Jamaica, where most of the a lot of the people, a large proportion of people came from or traveling from, because some people actually, for example, like Lord Kitchener, when he was visiting Jamaica, from Jamaica, he left from Jamaica to England, but he had to put on his address where he last lived, and he last lived in Jamaica. So when you look at his travel card, the actual document for the passenger, it shows him as coming from Jamaica. But whereas Lord Kitchener was Trinidadian, you see, so we're not really sure. We can't pin everybody down as to where they actually lived, where they were born. You see, for example, some people who were coming from Trinidad, they boarded the ship in Trinidad, were coming from Guyana, because they had to come, by some means from Georgetown to Port of Spain, wait for the ship, or be lucky to have the ship there and travel. So we don't really know. For example, there are people from Bermuda who are coming over, and we know that the majority of people from Bermuda, they were Bermudians. That's the thing. And there's a lot of them who came, who actually were connected with England, with Britain. Okay, mainly white people from Bermuda, and then you had people coming from Jamaica, of a mixed background as well. The Indo-Caribbean, Chinese Caribbean, very similar to Trinidad, very similar to Guyana, a mixed population.
And speaking of those issues of not being able to pin down people, I believe on a previous show that Territories Talk had regarding members of the Windrush generation, what has been some of the problems in modern day regarding those who came over on the Windrush generation? I from what I understood, there's problems with government-wise.
Yeah, well, I can explain by saying this. In 2018, there was what was called a Windrush scandal.
Okay.
Now, this Windrush scandal, and it's important for us to bring this into the conversation, because it caused a lot of problems for the government, because the government were actually caught out in discriminating against people, especially of African Caribbean background, African West Indian background, I should say, and they were, these I suppose vehicles going around the country and spearheading and pointing and making life uncomfortable for those Caribbean people who actually didn't have certain documentation. They had come with their parents in the 1950s and the 1960s. Things have moved on. Many of them did not travel back, and here's a protest. And this particular scandal really embarrassed the government, embarrassed them in the sense that they were caught out treating Caribbean people less favorable, and there was lots of cries of racism, that the government was treating people in a from the Caribbean in a different way, in a racial way, and because most of the people who were caught caught in this thing were people of African Caribbean background. But eventually, we know that there are other people who have been claiming compensation, this thing called a Windrush compensation scheme, Windrush compensation claims. And some people were deported, some people lost their homes, some people lost their jobs. It was quite a big thing. It almost brought the government down. In fact, one MP had to resign. You see, and in that sense, it was major. It was on it throughout April 2018. You had day after day this thing about a Windrush scandal, and well, it's still going. Well, I won't say the scandal has been completed, because people are still claiming Windrush. I should say Windrush claims to do with being, wanting, applying for compensation, and that's still going on. Amber Rudd was a lady who resigned, and she was embarrassed because she wasn't really up to scratch with the information about what was going on at the Home Office.
Mm-hmm.
They wrongly called this scandal, I would say falsely called this scandal, Windrush, but it wasn't really a Windrush scandal as such. It was a Home Office scandal. A Home Office were the people there who did the wrong. It wasn't the Windrush people who did anything wrong.
Right. Yes.
It was the Home Office, you see.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think to this day, Britain has been damaged by that incident that affected, I would say, hundreds of people, maybe thousands. We don't know how many as such, but we'll find out eventually as time goes on.
And how, for example, we're coming up to almost 80 years, I believe, will be in 2028, 80 years since Windrush. And do you find that today's generation of descendants of people who came in on the first, on Empire Windrush in 1948, do you find that they still have a connection to all that happened during that generation, or has over time there been a disconnect?
Well, that last word you mentioned, disconnect, I think the connection is still there.
Okay.
It's still there because, after all, those people who came in the early days, they left a foundation. And that foundation is to do with Caribbean culture, the way Caribbeans develop in terms of their food, in terms of their music. That still remains, and that they are still, kind of, I would say, a kind of a legacy then that continues through the people who came in the early days. It still continues in the community. There are community groups that maintain the culture, that maintain. They have events where they have West Indian, foods and songs and different things, and to do with the West Indies. In other words, they're remembering the West Indies. The West Indies have not gone out of memory, and that's an important thing for those younger people who are hearing what's going on. And Windrush Foundation is involved in that. We are involved in helping to keep the stories of those who came not only on the Empire Windrush, but those who came after. We also help to keep those stories alive. And that is what builds its identity. When one knows the history, their own history, the history of their parents' parents, that develops an identity that they are proud of. Because, these people who came in the early days, I mentioned the early days, let's say 80 years or more ago, they have contributed tremendously to making Britain what is this today. I mean, it's a modern country. Obviously, there are issues here in England and Britain, but it's just that those who came in the early days. Now you have Carnival. That's a very important part of each year. About 4 weeks ago or more, we had this particular event that attracts, hundreds of thousands of people from all over Europe, and elsewhere, actually from America and from the West Indies, that would come over and contribute to the Western Carnival in Notting Hill. So yes, this is one aspect of life from those people who came in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and so on, to make Britain a different place, make Britain a multicultural place. In fact, I mean, I would argue that those who came from the West Indies were the leaders in pushing multiculturalism in Britain, because we were the ones that actually pushed for certain laws, race relations laws. Okay. There was never a race relations law until 1965, and people from the Caribbean and for people from Asia, they were the people who actually brought about certain laws, 1965 and other laws. So here, this is Bernie Grant, an MP, among the first black MPs in the UK in the late 80s. A very important man. He's no longer alive, but he was the one who set up a lot of efforts, for people, younger people, to learn about Africa, to learn about the Caribbean. Bernie Grant is the man, MP.
And am I mistaken in saying that there was somebody from the start of the Notting Hill Carnival began with generation of Windrush generation?
Well, the person who actually was involved in bringing people together to actually have the first carnival. This lady here is Diane Abbott, but the lady is Claudia Jones. So Claudia Jones was a Trinidadian, and she and some friends, and by the way, Sam King was also involved in the first carnival, which was in 1959, right? And that carnival was held indoors, not outdoors, because those were wintry days, right? Could you imagine carnival? You showed an image there of these ladies dancing. Yes. You couldn't do that in the winter. Right? So you couldn't have carnival like that unless you can just dispel the snow and or whatever and dress like that. No, it was held indoors, but it developed, in the 1960s, mid 60s, and it went into the in the streets, into the streets. You see, Claudia Jones she wasn't alive then. She passed away. And others took up the mantle and had the carnival start in Notting Hill, you see, from scratch, from young people doing it with steel pan and walking around the street, until it's now, this particular multi-million pound industry now. That's right, Claudia Jones. You see, Claudia Jones, a dynamic lady. She was born in Trinidad. She spent a lot of her early life in America. She was involved in politics there, and we would credit her with the whole carnival spirit. She was one, I would say, that started the carnival spirit as a leader, and her legacy lives on within Notting Hill Carnival. Although she didn't live to see Notting Hill Carnival, but she was dynamic in getting people together, and I will include Sam King. He was a member of that organization that began that process of a carnival here in London, and then it developed, and well, it's all over Britain, Leeds, right. Nottingham, and so on.
My on a personal note, my brother and I went to a carnival. We went to a carnival. Can't remember. Chris will tell me if it was back in 2013, maybe. And it was quite an experience. Definitely something that somebody should do once in their lifetime, at least.
Absolutely. It's an experience. Obviously, it's becoming bigger, every year. Although, the streets of Notting Hill, it's still the same size, but there are more people coming in. So
Yes.
what they would do with this Notting Hill Carnival in the future, I mean, is left for people's, left for discussion, really, because it's getting bigger every year.
And as somebody who never really lived in the UK, but may have preset ideas about UK, is very jarring, right? To see the carnival in the midst of Notting Hill and the different those particular type of architecture where you on maybe movies or TV you see a different type of culture amongst that in that I'm in that area, for example.
Indeed, because what happens with Notting Hill Carnival is that it attracts all nationalities. People come from all over Europe, and they actually do their mass. You see,
Hmm.
and so on, and sometimes there are big groups of them, and have this particular set of shall I say masking, and yeah, if you could see them along the street, and there are just hundreds of participants that are sort of massing and tramping along the streets.
Yes, I recommend it to anybody who would like
Yeah.
to go there. Now we're coming up to at the top of the hour, so we have 4 minutes. Um, it- I would just like to mention just to the audience to let the audience know that um, Mr. Torrington is very humble because he has been awarded many awards, and I would just like to mention a couple of them just so that the audience can know a little bit more about your background. So in 2002, he was awarded the Officer of the British Empire for services to community relations. And in 2011, he was then awarded the CBE, which I believe is Citizen of British
Yes,
Empire,
CBE, that's right. That's right.
for services to Black British heritage. Um, I did mention the Equiano Society, but he has also been the founder of, um, I believe, I want to say, I have it written here, African Heritage Forum, which he
Yeah.
founded in 2011.
Mhm.
And also, I believe you were part of the Making Freedom traveling exhibition
Making exhibition, that's right.
that
That's 13.
yes, it celebrated emancipation,
That's
full emancipation. So
hmm
I just wanted to give a little bit more about your background, just so the audience can know that the history
Yeah,
that you have
and
built.
what is good to mention then to the audience is that in 2002, that award, that OB award, is to do with Windrush and my involvement in the community. But what is more interesting is that in 2011, the CBE was for work and my contribution to Equiano, Olauda Equiano, because we did so much work with Equiano.
Mm,
At one time, he was hardly ever known in the community in 1996. I mean, I only got to know him in 1996. But now, Equiano kind of like, is very popular. He's known almost everywhere because there are monuments for him and so on. In fact, we had a monument for Equiano where he was buried, in a place called near Tottenham Court Road, off Tottenham
hmm.
Court Road. There's a monument for him there to remember him. So, you know, he's well known. So in that sense, the OBE was for him. No, sorry, not the OBE. Sorry, the CBE
This
was to do with Equiano's work on Equiano.
and speaking of your work, for example, you had mentioned earlier about people taking up the mantle and continuing on the legacy. What would you like to see, or what have you seen with people taking up the legacy of the Windrush generation?
Well, the legacy is about talking and ensuring then that the stories of these men and women who came because they were bold. I mean, they were people who were like, scouts that go out and spy the land and then say, okay, come on, those of you who want to come over to England and to Britain in general, and try to make a living and prosper, bring up a family, and so on. That is what is important about the legacy. They set an actual foundation, and that foundation is built on by the younger generation, those who follow after. You see, so that's what I would like to see, that the younger generation appreciates those who came before them, and the sacrifice, that they've made. You see, because Britain is a different place from it than it was in the 1950s and 60s. Things were more, more difficult. Accommodation was hard to find. You can go to places and they would say, no Irish, no colors, no dogs, that sort of things. You don't hear that kind of things, those things now. But because, that's right, no Irish, no blacks, no dogs. And because of that particular fight, and this fight was a fight that involved African and Caribbean people, Asian people, Irish people, and they fought to make Britain a different place, far more multicultural. I mean, for example, you have St. Patrick's Day, you have Windrush Day. Windrush has its own day now. St. George's Day. Now, those things wouldn't have happened if it wasn't the fight, it wasn't the push, it wasn't the campaigning of the people from the past. You see, and that is so important for young people to know. They've got here not because they've done it. The young people have done it. No. They had to actually rely on those who came before them, who built that foundation. So all these different days of celebration, we mentioned St. Patrick's Day. You have Windrush Day, which is a commemorative day. It's not so much. It's a day of celebrating those who came and stood firm. You celebrate them. That is what happens on Windrush Day, a celebration of people, and not so much celebrating a ship. That's important to note.
Now, is Windrush Day June 22nd?
That's right. So every June the 22nd, that particular day is earmarked, and will go on and on and on beyond our time, because you have these days that go back so long before, like St. George's Day go back a long time, you see, and St. Patrick's Day go back a long time. But the main thing there is that those of us who can commemorate these days, and it helps really the legacy.
Now, and I'll close out with this question. For example, from the news on this side of the world, we see that there are a lot of protests or anti-immigration protests currently going on in the UK. How would the Windrush legacy of, for example, coming and scouting and carving out a future for future generations, how can you use that to encourage immigrants that are coming to the UK today?
Now, this is important. There is still campaigns to do with this thing they call the Windrush scandal and compensation. You have campaigns going on and will go on for a while, because people are still waiting for compensation. And yes, it's important to have the campaigns alive, and that younger people get involved in it. But then it's to do with people who came over not as immigrants so much so, but they came over as settlers. Those people who came over with passports.
Okay.
And when you travel anywhere with a passport, and that passport gives you a right, to stay in that country, you're no longer an immigrant. You're going in as a settler. Because those people, for example, who are coming over from France to England on boats, some small boats, if they had passports, they wouldn't come by small boats. They would, take a plane and go through customs, and everything is all right. So that what didn't happen to the people who came that generation before.
Mm-hmm.
They came with passports, even those who got mixed up with this particular thing that the Home Office did on them, and was a mistake. It certainly was a terrible injustice. The Home Office had to acknowledge that they came as rightful citizens, not immigrants.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Understood. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we close out today?
Yes, I would indeed. I would actually say to my brothers and sisters in the West Indies is that here in England, here in I should say in Britain, that memory of the Caribbean, the West Indies, that memory is still there. That connection is still there. You see, we read what's happening in the West Indies, in the Caribbean, in Bermuda, in Trinidad, in Barbados, in St. Lucia, all the different islands and countries, Guyana and Belize. We are in touch.
Mm-hmm.
And we would never, ever forget them. We are all brothers and sisters, whether Indo-Caribbean, Chinese Caribbean, all types of people that live in the Caribbean now, we're all one.
But I was now that I was going to end, but actually that brings up another question for me is, for example, having, for example, people that are living in Jamaica or living in the different islands, taking advantage or making an opportunity out of people who are living in the diaspora. So extending their islands beyond their formal boundaries and saying, listen, we have people all over the world. In this case, we have people in the UK or whatnot, and being able to create that link from between the diaspora and the island, and using that to create things on the island or empower people on the island. How do you view that?
Well, what I know is that there are people, who are still connected with the Caribbean, with the West Indies, in business or in social programs, and that connection is there, and it's encouraged. I go to events where that is mentioned, and that program is going on. That project, that overseas project, is connected, so that, and then we have these programs where we can do it online, like for example, like doing it now, where that connection is there.
Okay.
Connected, and therefore there's a support coming from Britain, whether it's financial, whether it's just social support, visiting each other. That's happening, and that's what keeps the culture going. That is the legacy.
Okay. Awesome. And would you like to mention once again the event that you will be holding on the 12th of October?
Yes, indeed. That event is an online event. People can, they can sign up and get involved. The actual Eventbrite is a free event, and we're having some important people who are actually going to be on the program, and that it helps to develop leadership anywhere, not only in England, but leadership worldwide. And there are people coming on to help us to share leadership qualities, examples of leadership, stories about what happened before with the Windrush people who came on the ship, those who came after in the 50s and 60s and so on. So really it's going to be a program to develop and to share knowledge about leadership.
I think that's awesome. I think that's a really good, it'll be a really good event and a good way to strengthen the ties between the islands and people in the UK. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for inviting, and it's a pleasure to have been able to share.
I've learned so much today from you. Thank you very much, Mr. Torrington. And I'm going to take liberties and say you're always welcome to come back.
Oh, yes. I'm always willing to be invited. All right.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Well,
Okay, then.
thank
Bye.
you very much,
Yeah, okay,
and
bye.
have a great afternoon.
Yeah, same to you. Okay, then. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.